Welcome to today's edition of Forum Conversations. I am Hannah Marshall, and I'm joined today with my colleague, Damian Shand. We're both from the Forum team. And for those of you who aren't already aware, we are talking today with Tuskegee University Archivist and Associate Professor Dana Chandler. So we're going to be talking to you today a little bit about some of the history of Tuskegee, and then you're also going to be talking to us about some of the incredible work that you do as the university's archivist and some of the collections that you and your team have been making available using Forum. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Damian and Professor Chandler so that we can make up for lost time.
Thank you very much, Hannah, and welcome, Professor Chandler, and welcome everyone to the webinar. And just to kind of get us in the mood and get us in the place and perhaps somewhat of the time period, as you know, the chapel collection features a lot of audio, and so I'm going to open with a song, which is a great way to start. And so do enjoy. This is a song called Old Time Religion, and it's actually from 1916, and it's sung by the Tuskegee Institute Singers. Once again, that was Old Time Religion from 1916 by the Tuskegee Institute Singers. And so let's kick off. Good afternoon and welcome again, Professor Chandler. And first off, could you tell me perhaps a little bit about the history of Tuskegee University and sort of situate it for us? You know, perhaps like somewhat in the context of that song. Like, what's the background of Tuskegee?
You know, Tuskegee University began in 1881, actually July 4th, 1881, through the efforts of Lewis Adams and George W. Campbell. George W. Campbell was a former slave owner. Lewis Adams was a former slave. And they got together and decided that they needed a school here in Macon County, Alabama. And George W. Campbell went before the state of Alabama, and the state of Alabama provided the original funding to start Tuskegee. The reason why we're located in the Black Belt, there's a lot of plantations in this area, in this region, and the need for education was profound. That they needed the school and needed a way for students to be taught vocational material was a big deal. And they went to Hampton University in Virginia and hired Booker T. Washington to be the first principal. Booker T. Washington comes here with a notion at 26 years old to start a school that could help his people. And at the time when he got here, within 2 days, he was out in the county driving around, when I say driving, a horse and buggy. And he found the county a lot of abject poverty. And the people were emaciated because of poor nutrition. And there was a need amongst the people for something. And Booker T. Washington approached education in a holistic manner. What he'd said was a healthy hand, head, and heart. The hand dealing with, your work, the head with education, and the heart with spirituality. And that's always been a part of Tuskegee's educational philosophy, is providing a holistic education to the students that came here. And that's true of a lot of HBCUs also. But what makes us different is that Booker T. Washington expended so much energy to get this started and to bring in the best he could, and that whether it be students or faculty or staff. And you listening to that song just a few minutes ago, by the way, that's one of 8 albums that we have from 1906 to 1916.
Wow.
With the Tuskegee Singers.
Wow. So it started to service the need, and you can see from this photo, which is in one of your archival collections, the PH Polk family collection. And did it take off like really quickly? You said, did the head, heart, and hand work?
Yes, it did. It took off very well. And what ended up is that Tuskegee, bringing in the people that we're talking about, they provided Tuskegee with all of this material that could help students teach other people. So they were teaching teachers to teach others. And that is why Tuskegee became so successful, is because of this notion to help others by teaching teachers to go out into the communities. And it included all this important vocational aspect as well as intellectual. Whether we're talking about Latin being taught here, or we're talking about electrical work being taught here, or brick making, all of it was always constantly this healthy hand, head, and heart.
So it's like profoundly changed the community it was in, and started to bring Tuskegee into the modern world.
Yes.
So I with the archive in particular, when did you arrive there, and did you know about the archive before you got to Tuskegee, and what were your first impressions of it?
I've been here for 13 years. My time here at Tuskegee, I actually did some intern work here many years ago, and actually, I guess I could go back further than that. 1976, I think, when I was a young man, 12 years old, my father brought us down here to visit Carver's laboratory, and I fell in love with the place then.
Oh, wow.
And I knew that this was a special place. And through years and years of work and opportunities, I was given the opportunity to come here to work at Tuskegee, getting away from my other job and my other career, because it caused me to travel around the world, and I was away from home all the time. I had the opportunity to come here to work on a particular project, a 2-year project. And when I got here, I felt like I needed to stay here and work here because of how rich the collections were. But they were in a mess. It had been closed for 10 years. There was all kinds of vermin, bodies of rats and mice and bugs and pigeon droppings. And it took us 2 months to get it in order for me to even start the project. And I had to identify what was here in order to properly do the project. And by doing that, we put it in order, and by putting it in order, the president of the university saw what we were able to accomplish, and then hired me on as the university's archivist.
Well, I don't know how many other archivists are out there listening, but that's I don't know how many stories there are like that. Battling rats, that seems to say to me that it's been a real labor of love.
It has. Not only rats, but bats also. Yeah, we had to deal with bats for about 6 months. So It's got to be a labor of love. You got to work. You can't be afraid of it. You've got to work, and you got to put your heart and soul into it.
So yeah, everyone out there, if you're having a bad day in the office, just you haven't perhaps got bats. So to talk a little about the material that's there. I know you mentioned Carver's laboratory, and that's George Washington Carver.
Right.
You tell us a little bit about him, because he's in the PH Polk collection. There are lots and lots of photos of Carver, and he seems to have been a sort of Renaissance man. Yes,
the collection that you have on shared shelf that is through JSTOR and the like, that collection is a reflection of the materials that we have here in the archives. We have over 600 historically significant collections and over 250,000 images of African American related themes, going back from the earliest types of tintype photography, and that does not include born digital. The materials that we've digitized about 40,000 of the 250,000 images, and of the reel-to-reel tapes, we've digitized about 170 of the 750 that we have. The Carver collection is just one collection that we have, and we have everything about Carver. In fact, today we have a visitor that's bringing 56 letters from Carver that were addressed to her father, and she's donating them to the archives today. And the rich collections, materials that are one of a kind, and I'll just suggest, come visit me and you'll see.
I would definitely love to come down, particularly now the bats aren't there. Maybe bats in the distance. So they have George Washington Carver, and another very interesting sort of historical character, it seems to me, and very important. And again, which leads us towards speaking about the chapel collection and and how it can become a central civil rights movement resource. And even before the civil rights movement, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that it was already building in Tuskegee before then. And there's Monroe Nathan Work did lots of interesting work. Could you speak a little about him and what materials you have?
Would love to talk about Monroe Nathan Work. Let me go back to Carver again. Carver was a dear friend of P.H. Polk's, and that's why you see so many images. And we found in the Polk collection, when we collected it over 2 years ago, we found another 50 images that have never been seen by the public, that were taken by Polk of Carver. So yeah, those are very important. And Monroe Nathan Work is the first archivist at Tuskegee. He started the Department of Records and Research in 1906, although there was an archive, if you would call it that, even earlier than that. Monroe Nathan Work is famous for the Negro Yearbook, which was published from 1913 to 1943. Those books are everything statistical about African Americans. And Monroe Work was not only a collector, but a collector of details and data. And it ended up that we ended up with 166 file cabinets, 4-drawer file cabinets containing over 1 million items. And that is the genesis of our collection.
That's incredible.
A lot of stuff. Yes, it is.
And that's, what for one person to have begun that, and then this is perhaps why Tuskegee, became such a crucible for the civil rights movement later on, civil rights movement, proper, as it were.
Yep. Let me add to that, if I might.
Sure.
Monroe, we are the home of the lynching records. The lynching records that are here on campus were actually compiled originally by Monroe Work, and they are very exacting. He had very stringent criteria that had to be met in order for those names to be included in our records. And it's amazing to look at those records to to try to get a feel of what Monroe Work was looking for and searching out in his collection. He's not an archivist, although he did the work of an archivist by collecting and saving the material. He did not know how to compile it, but that was left for later on.
And so, was this a unique endeavor at the time? Do you know, or is it sort of the outstanding example? And also, I can kind of guess, but I'm wondering, what he was intending to do with it, what the hoped for effect was.
I think Monroe Work, it was all about the data and understanding what was going on in the African American condition at that particular time. And he, because of his work, it leads to some other things that come up, like the Little Rosenwald schools, the Tuskegee Airmen. All of those things are an outcome of the things that were being developed here at Tuskegee. Because it was a repository of everything African American, other African Americans wanted to come here to know more, to learn more. And it became a source of information, and information that they wouldn't have gotten just anywhere else.
And so then, like, with that information comes the empowerment. You mentioned the Tuskegee Airmen. For instance, so tell us how Monroe Nathan works, his record keeping, and what he set off. How did that lead to the Tuskegee Airmen, would you say?
It draws people in like George L. Washington, who is an individual that most people don't know about, who is the founder of the Tuskegee Airmen. George L. Washington came here to study, to teach, to work. He headed up the mechanical engineering division, or the mechanical division at that time, and he started the civilian pilot training program. So what that information did was to bring in or draw people to Tuskegee as a beacon draws moths to it. This drew people to it because it was a beacon of hope, of information, of possibilities. And those people were some of the best and the brightest at their times. And so that's why you have so many important events regarding anything in this nation. The Rosenwald Schools, the Tuskegee Airmen, the first extension agent, federal extension agent, Tom Campbell, Tuskegee University. All those you can go back to the fact that this was a place, a special place, that drew the special people into it.
Okay, so that is the perfect cue for our next clip, and this is from the Chapel collection, which we'll be discussing in more detail in a second. But this is a special person who is familiar to all of you. But this was a speech given by him in 1957 at the Tuskegee Civic Association meeting, and it was a meeting with lots of speakers, and he was clearly the star speaker. He spoke at the end, and the speaker is, and you've probably guessed it, Martin Luther King.
The road that leads to the city of freedom is not a straight road. It has its curves. It's a meandering road. We must see that. If we are to gain first-class citizenship and human dignity in the Southland, we must be willing to sacrifice. I don't know, it might mean going to jail. That's right. But I've come to see now that if going to jail is a price that we must pay to gain freedom, we must be willing to fill up the jailhouses of the South. When I think of the fact that Paul went to jail. When I think of the fact that many of the great saints of the generations past went to jail, I begin to say that going to jail isn't the worst thing after all. And let nobody fool you. Integration is not some lavish dish that the white man will hand out on a silver platter while the Negro merely furnishes the appetite. If we are going to have integration, we must sacrifice and suffer for it. And as I close this evening, I want to say this to you, that freedom is the greatest thing in all the world. Yes. And this is all we're asking of our white brothers. That's all. That's all we're asking. We just want to be free. We don't want to take away 1 hour of your prosperity. We just want to be free. We don't want to overpower the government and take over and run over the nation. We just want to be free. We don't want to incorporate into the veins of our nation and our civilization a philosophy of black supremacy. We just want to be free. We don't want to be your brother-in-law. We just want to be your brother.
So that was Martin Luther King, 1957, and speaking at the Tuskegee Civic Association meeting. And that's from the Chapel Collection, which Dana led the charge on. And it's a wonderful collection, I think. And if you haven't had a chance to explore it yet, I think you certainly will after hearing a bit more about it. But one of the interesting things about this collection, it's a mixture of audio and photographic documentation. And I'll let Dana speak a bit more about that. What would you say makes the Chapel collection particularly interesting? Also, just one quick question: why is it called the Chapel collection? So,
well, before I go any further, isn't that a great speech? I mean, it's incredible, and it still has application to today. It sends chills down my spine. Y'all, if you get a chance, you need to see the accompanying photograph of that. It is amazing. It's a P.H. Polk photograph. It will take your breath away, and it's taken during the time that he gives this very speech. The Chapel collection is called that because it was housed in the Tuskegee University Chapel. And we retrieved these files about 7 years ago. They were stacked up in the back corner of a room. And if you were to see the shape that the boxes were in, you would understand our concerns for the tapes. It was awful. It was really pretty bad. Roughly 750 tapes, most of them coming from talks that were given on campus and around the campus that were made by campus employees or university employees, that were made from at times when speeches were given by prominent civil rights workers. All of them came to Tuskegee. I mean, all of them. Amazing individuals that came, such as Murley Evers, and Mrs. King came and spoke. And that Murley Evers tape, I'll tell you this much, it still sends chills down my spine to hear that tape. John Lewis, and I could go on and on and on at the numbers of people that spoke here at Tuskegee. And what's important about those tapes is that most of the time, these are talks that are given in front of an all-black audience, not an audience that is mixed or that has white reporters in it, but an audience that is listening and wanting to hear something that they could all just attach to. And the speakers are speaking to their black speakers, speaking to black audience. And if you don't think that there's a difference between that and what they said in front of a white audience or in front of the white news media, you're fooled, because it's very different and very prominent, very high energy, and straightforward. It's amazing stuff to hear.
It is incredible. The Miley Evers speech. Her husband had been murdered, hadn't he?
Yes.
And it's very, very, very powerful. You know, you can feel her reacting to that, and then gaining. You know, she talks about her own struggle with, you know, how she lost hope, but you know, she was remembering him and trying to pull everyone together. Yeah, and just flicking through some of the images here, and as you can see, lots of famous faces, lots of people who are familiar to us all: Jesse Jackson, Muhammad Ali.
That Muhammad Ali, hold on that one right there. That
Sure.
Muhammad Ali, everyone, the speech he gave here at Tuskegee. By the way, that photograph, it's never been seen before until we released it. Many of these photographs have never been seen before until we released them. But the speech that he gave, Muhammad Ali gave, is just like you would think. It was serious and funny as all get out. And one of the things that he talks about there is his fight with Sonny Liston. And there's it's well known amongst boxing aficionados. I don't call myself that, but I do remember my dad talking about it, the invisible punch. And it knocked Liston down. And everybody called it the invisible punch. And Muhammad Ali said, no, that wasn't an invisible punch. Liston felt it all the way to the ground. That's those kind of things, those little nuggets you look for in these tapes that provide humanity to the pictures.
I agree. I listened to that one also, and I very much agree with your summary of it. It's very, very funny, and I think back to your point of it's perhaps the sort of speech that would not necessarily have been given if it was more in the white media. And
right.
One thing I found very funny about it is that he keeps on boasting about how rich he is, and the audience is lapping it up. But he's of course there, and he's donating money as well. But it's very funny. That side of this collection that very much interests me, and it's thinking almost like going through some of those images and how we have the more well-known figures. So, MLK, and we've got Muhammad Ali here, and we've sort of Jesse Jackson
and Jackie Robinson.
But we also have there's I think this is a point that I'm going to play another speech, and you can maybe expand on it afterwards. That part of the importance of this collection is that, as well as having these absolute luminaries and very important people in the movement and in African American history, you also have lesser known but certainly not lesser figures.
Exactly. Yes.
One of the speech I'm going to play for you now is an excellent, very funny. There's so much humor in these speeches, and it adds to the dignity and the power, I feel. But this is. It was on the same occasion that Martin Luther King spoke at the clip we just heard. So it's back in 1957, and again it's the Tuskegee Civic Association meeting, and his name is Reverend K.L. Buford.
Buford, yes. He's amazing.
He's absolutely incredible. We can talk about him in just one sec, and I'll just play the speech, and then you can perhaps expand for us, Dana.
I will, yes.
I tell you that one of the most terrible pages in our American history is the treatment of the Negro. And it appears that the closing lines of this page are yet to be written. But thank God, we stand on the threshold of a great new day. And as has said Dr. Martin Luther King, it is a new Negro that stands there. One white speaker addressing a group in South Carolina said, "We have had a bear by its tail since 1619, and we didn't know it until now." I'm reminded just here of this humorous little story that is told of the farmer who was losing his livestock to a bear. One night he said to his wife, I'm going outside to the barn and I'm going to hide. And when that bear comes to kill some of the stock tonight, I'm going to kill him. Said, "I want you and I want John to stay in the house. I can take care of everything." After a while, the bear made his appearance, and a gunshot was heard, which was followed by a scuffle. The farmer's wife called out and said, "John, do you have the bear?" He said, "Yes, but I wish somebody would come and help me let him go." It appears to me that someone needs to come and help our friends to let this bear go.
Okay, so once again, that was Reverend K.L. Buford in 1957. So tell us a little about him, Dana.
We actually have his collection. We retrieved that about 6 years ago. He's a very interesting speaker, isn't he? And you're going to hear him a lot on the TCA files that we have placed on shared shelf. Buford, he's part of a group called the Tuskegee Civic Association, which they were fighting a very horrible situation here in Tuskegee, where the white government had disenfranchised the black vote by gerrymandering or changing the city's limits. And what had happened is, by doing that, it kept out 95% of the African American vote that would have overturned the white majority in the city government. And because of that gerrymandering, it led to the 1961 Supreme Court case, Gomillion versus Lightfoot. If that case doesn't happen when it does, and it successfully goes toward Gomillion, then the 1965 Voters' Rights Act would not have happened then. This is the impetus for that to happen. So 1957, a pivotal year at Tuskegee in Macon County, and Buford brings to the podium and brings to the stage at that time a voice of reason. But as you noted in the file and the what you'd played, he also did it in a way that was very appealing to the audience, and they were very receptive to the way he handled things. And Buford sided with Martin Luther King in wanting things to be done and handled peacefully, as did Charles Gomillion, the one who participated in the Gomillion versus Lightfoot case. So it is an important speech, and one of many, as I said.
Yeah, that's very true. I said, and I believe that Buford became one of the first. He was one of the first elected officials since Reconstruction.
Oh, Sheriff Amison was the first. And
okay.
at when that happened, he became one of the first. But Buford did end up, yes, sitting on the city council. Yes, he did.
And so you see, it's kind of indicative of how this collection really shows how things are beginning to develop. And so, looking sort of back on our conversation so far, we've started with a university that was begun to change lives in the local area, and then here we are, something like 70 years later or so, 60, 70 years later, and this massive energy is building, and Tuskegee is becoming a real crucible in the civil rights movement. And one of the things I thought was interesting in that, and again, like thinking about where we opened up, was the old time religion, and obviously Reverend Buford.
Right.
Speak a lot about the themes there that run through the collection and the
movement. And they go hand in hand. Most of the meetings that were done at TCA were done at churches, and because that's where people gathered and that's where people congregated. They knew those areas, and they came there, and it was places that people felt comfortable at and safe, and they would come there and practice their religion, but also there they would also be involved with civil and social problems that they would try to resolve. And the spiritual and the secular went hand in hand. Mm-hmm. And you'll see that in speeches by Buford and others. Ralph David Abernathy does the exact same thing when he speaks. And you'll hear them talking about these social issues, these political issues, these civil rights issues from the pulpit, pushing the notion of equality, one people under God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems it runs through so much, and then then in a slightly different way in Muhammad Ali's speech, and here we can see Malcolm X. You see the beginnings of Nation of Islam movement as well, and it's absolutely incredible, like how much you can trace here. And this is why for people listening who know of scholars of this period out there, or people who are just interested, it's something to send them towards, because it's just, as I say, just fantastically interesting. And it also takes you through from almost that the sort of that beginning with Martin Luther King and Buford and those speeches we heard, and then you can see the development towards the Black Power movement and the Black Panthers, etc. And so one speech that I'm now going to play, it's the last full speech that we'll play today. Unfortunately, we could do this for hours, but it shows how much, if you think of those first couple of speeches in 1957, and the next audio clip we're going to play from the collection is of Shirley Chisholm, and she. I'm sorry.
That's a fire win. That's a good one.
It's a real winner. She's great.
She is.
And she was, I believe, the first African American woman to be elected to the United States Congress, yes. And was also first African American candidate for a major political party to run for the nomination for president. So that's the person we're going to listen to now. So this is Shirley Chisholm, and do enjoy, and go and listen to the whole speech afterwards.
The United States has been built on power, but you see what has happened for such a long time? We have been relegated to a set position in America, and nobody ever dreamt and believed that the day was going to come when we too were going to begin to turn around and reverse the position and practice the same thing that every other group has been doing ad infinitum. And that was power to control our lives like every other group has been doing. But the only thing, my brothers and sisters, you better understand is this. It's not power that is bothering people. It's the adjective black before the noun power.
So there, I think you get a little bit of a taste of why she was the first African-American woman elected to the United States Congress. Very, very powerful speech, and there's lots more of it. I think so. That's the kind of the last speech, kind of leading us through to where the more modern era. How much more do you have to add, like beyond say 1971, Dana?
Well, actually, we do have speeches that we haven't uploaded through 1976, and they're all very powerful. But that's not only civil rights related materials that we're releasing. We're planning on releasing some more audio of the Tuskegee singers when they're the first African American singers to be asked to sing at the Radio Music Hall, and we're going to release that. We're also going to release a concert that was given here by one of the leading African American singers, gospel singers of the time in the 1950s, and we're going to be releasing that soon. In fact, it's, I think, the only one that's ever recorded the full concert, and we'll be releasing that soon. And other things that are pertinent to the community, that not only speak to the political aspect, the social aspect, but also the artistic aspect. We want to provide a cross section of information that shows Booker T. Washington's continued notion of a healthy hand, head, and heart. And I will probably conclude with what we're going to add with some interesting audio and video from the 1960s and 70s of teachers here when you have some of the first white teachers here at Tuskegee. So it's kind of interesting too.
Yeah, so we're going in the direction where it's no longer such an issue, and which just goes to show how powerful the movement has been. So I was just wondering, for the people listening, we're going to have a lot of people out there who are building collections themselves and a response, and they want to get started on these kinds of projects. Could I ask, what was the sort of practicalities of it? You worked with what's now called JSTOR Forum. You've mentioned Shared Shelf a couple of times. We renamed it just a few months ago, and some of you will be aware of that, and some of you not. But it's essentially the tool that we as ArtStore, JSTOR, and Ithaca, we have made available for that use. I was wondering, did you work with a big team or to put it together? And how did you decide what to start with?
That's an interesting question, and the answer, no. It was me, my assistant, and 2 interns. And how did I start all this? I knew that we needed to save the tapes. And first of all, everyone, you need to know your collections. You need to know what you have, and you need to know that it is all deteriorating, and you've got to be able to save it. Number 2, looking for the right equipment. Right equipment is essential. And we decided that we didn't have the funds to send it out to be digitized by this company or company B. We realized that in order to be able to properly use the funds that we have, the little funds that we did have, we need to buy our own equipment and then learn how to use that equipment. Everyone out there that's listening, I'm going to encourage you to realize that you need to make backups always, and always save in the raw format. What you're hearing is you're seeing JPEGs and you're listening to MP3s. But that's not what you want to save. You want to save the raw data for the photographs and like TIFF files. For audio, you want to save them in the raw format. We used Audacity in order to work with the tapes. It was a process, Damien, as anything is a process. We had to go from what do we do, what do we buy, and then how do we process it? You know, going from analog to digital is difficult because each tape, each decade, the chemical aspect and the physical aspect of the tapes would change as they progressed and evolved in their manufacturing techniques. It changed so that the early tapes may, when you play running through a standard player, may sound slow, and then the further along you get, they get faster, and you have to adjust the sounds. You have to be able to figure out what the original voices sounded like. There's so much that you have to do, and it is a process. It's not something you're going to learn overnight. And I've recommended to others, if you get a chance and can come here, I will train you. But it is a process that of learning process. One of the things that we learned early on, we tried to upload our files to then shared shelf, and nobody could play them. They were on there, but nobody could play them. And the reason why they couldn't play them, we figured it out here at Tuskegee, is because we work with Macs, and Macs were loading on the front end iTunes, so that the only place you could play those reel-to-reels, those MP3s, were on iTunes. So an IBM computer couldn't. And so once we removed that front matter, everybody could play them. And to make it available for everybody around the world is another thing that we took into consideration. And that's why we used what we used in order to do this project. And why we continue to upload is so that people around the world can have access to, we believe in free access to this material because it's so important for everybody. And I want to add one more thing if I could. Sure. How important are these materials? We have friends at the University of Queensland in Australia that have told me that they wanted this stuff available because they have not gone through their civil rights movement yet, and neither have they in Brazil. And having these materials available provides them some understanding of the workings of the civil rights movement and what may transpire in their respective nations. So it is pertinent today, not just from a historical standpoint, but from a social standpoint as well.
Yeah, that's incredible, and goes to show, how useful it is to make, more than useful. Useful is a very tame word for that, but to make these sorts of materials, which in the past would, if you had the means to get to the Tuskegee archive, then obviously then you could, perhaps come and see a few things and do a bit of research. But to make these so widely available, would you say that making these materials more discoverable as you have, has that increased sort of people visiting physically as well?
Yes, sure they have. One of the things is that we found out just a few weeks ago, and I talked to you about it, Damien, is that we found out that all these news outlets around the nation and around the world have latched on to the fact that we have released these materials, and they've made it known to their own people in their own communities. And because of that, I get calls all the time from other places saying, hey, we heard that, we would like to send you this. And I've gotten things like today on my desk I have a copy of a yearbook that we did not have, that was sent to me by a lady in Pinellas Park, Florida, because she heard our tape.
Wow.
So listen, the materials we've got. The gentleman brought us 6 albums from Nashville, Tennessee, of the Tuskegee singers that we did not know existed, and dating from 1906 to 1913, and we now have the originals in our hands here at Tuskegee. So yes, it has opened up the opportunity for us to continue to collect more.
So it's great for the expansion of knowledge, and great for the importance of the archive. So in that sense, Tuskegee, as you mentioned earlier on, it attracted lots of special people and lots of interesting people, and now making this material available, so attracting even more material to make that collection more complete and that record more complete.
And I would like to say thank you to JSTOR and those involved with JSTOR Art Store for the opportunity that we've had to place these materials online and make them available to the world. It has been a big deal, and it continues to be a big deal, and it's one that is paying off in dividends for people, not just for us or for JSTOR, but for people. This is something that gives them hope, something that gives them enlightenment, something that gives them something they can tie to hopefully a better future.
I think that's we're very proud that we helped make this collection available, and that's a very powerful statement, and a good place, unfortunately, to leave the general the presentation right now, and we can go over to some questions. And but yeah, I do hope that everyone gets a chance to, everyone sort of goes and visits the collection, and it will have information to make sure you can get to it very easily. And so,
actually, on that note, Damien, there's a good question for us to start with here that just came in, not to the main questions panel, but to me as a private message, that's asking Dana, how do you advertise and promote the public collections in order to gain that visibility that you were just alluding to? Do you have sort of tried and true methods that you've been using?
Yeah, it's several things. We're very active on social media. And that has, when we released this information about the Martin Luther King, Jackie Robinson, and Muhammad Ali tapes, and are putting stuff on shared shelf, immediately we had close to 25,000 likes on that material, and then it just spread like wildfire. And I just stopped looking to see how many people were liking that on Facebook. But our website has had almost 1 million hits in 7 years, and continues to be spread by word of mouth through academia and otherwise, for people to come to find out this information. And we have links on our website to the collection and other things, of course, and that has paid off. Public speaking, I'm called on to speak at a number of organizations, and then the word of mouth from Tuskegee alumni, that's been amazing how it's helped us also. So it's been a process. One of the things you've got to do is you've got to get your administration to buy in, to understand the importance of the archives, and to say, hey, we want to support this. And my immediate supervisor, Juanita Roberts, and the president of the university, they have been behind me from the very beginning. And because of their support and my staff and their excitement at what we have, it's allowed it to just explode in ways that I was just not expecting.
That's great. Okay, we've had a few questions, and I want to mention one comment that was made by Elena or Eleanor Sisti, which was, "Thank God I don't have to deal with that." And I assume it's to do with the bats and the rats.
Yeah.
So
it was not pleasant. It was not pleasant, but it's not pleasant dealing with you're making you're copying a recording and the tape breaks on you 4 or 5 times. Mm-hmm. That's not fun either.
So an added hazard. Actually, on the question of tapes, there's a question from Wendy de Groot, and it's a sort of process question. Did you play tapes on an old cassette or other player into a microphone to create the digital file?
No, I did not. That does not work very well because of the ambient noise. It is so bad. So what we did was we searched and found a reel-to-reel player. Now we also have a cassette player, we have a VHS player, we have a beta tape player. We've got all those, a micro player, and we run all of those through an analog to digital converter, which is, they're fairly cheap. And then we run them into our Macs and use, for the audio, we use Audacity software to adjust it. And to get rid of some of the popping and the cracking. Some of it, like the albums, you don't want to get rid of too much of that because it adds to the sound as far as I'm concerned. But some of the things we had to really work at through the use of Audacity, and then we use Movie Maker to work with the videos. And what's the hard part is learning how to use all that material, all those softwares.
Yeah, that's a big learning curve, but you have made that offer, Dana, of training, and so
yes, it is available.
And actually, in talking about sort of people coming to visit and how these sorts of projects can bring people and attract more artifacts, etc., to the collection. We have a message from Rachel Walton, and who's had to run to another meeting, but she thinks that she at her institution, Rollins College, they have some connected collections related to Booker T. Washington's teacher, Nathalie Lord, and so she's left her email, and we'll make sure that you two get into conversation.
Actually, I'm already in conversation with Rollins College about some things. I was fortunate to speak with them last Friday at the Society of Florida Archivists meeting. So yeah, we're ready to help in any way we can.
That's marvelous. So I have a question again. When did the archive launch online, and how has it impacted donations? I think we talked a little bit earlier on, but maybe expand a bit more on that.
We launched our website 9 years ago. We utilized a community-based software. It's called DSpace for our web presence, and it's also a very good repository software. We have both an in-house and a site that we can utilize that's working with DSpace, and which allows us to use anything, documents, video, audio, anything that we need, we can put online and make available and link to other websites which we use, WordPress and other things, to make outside websites for interesting topics. Like these 56 letters we got in today, we'll put them on a separate website for people to use and utilize as soon as we get them digitized, which we hope to have them done by tomorrow. And we started about that many years ago with the website, but we started actively working on our audio roughly 3 years ago, almost 4. And during that time, it was that first 6 months was a big learning curve. But after we got through with that, we were able to move remarkably quickly on digitizing our audio and some of our video stuff using with our VCRs and stuff like that. So yeah, it has done a lot to help us along the way. Yes, it has.
Great. So, and then a more sort of just practical, straightforward question: Are transcripts of the speeches available anywhere along with the MP3s?
Not yet. That is something that we are working on. In fact, we are thinking about doing something about that during the summer. And so we are, first of all, motivated to transcribe some oral histories that we have, and then we're going to move from there to some of these audio tapes and to transcribe those. And we're looking at several different methods to properly handle that.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for listening along with us and submitting your questions. And of course, a huge thank you to Professor Chandler for talking with us today. It's been hugely interesting, and I've certainly learned a lot. And I think just remains to say, as we mentioned earlier on, we will be sending around, you'll get a recording of the webinar. You can also download the slides if you want to look through them. And of course, we do encourage you to go straight to Tuskegee University Archive website and explore the absolute cornucopia of material that's available there. And and again, let anyone who is a scholar or a student of that period know about this resource, because it's just ridiculous, how many different directions they can go in. And also, if you want to know a bit more about JSTOR Forum, it's formerly Shared Shelf, which Dana mentioned, supports these audio files and of the image files, and got plenty of material for you to find out more about that. So you can get your collections shared among whomever you would like them to see. It doesn't necessarily have to go out to the whole world, but you can just go across your institution. But there's a lot of different options to explore there. And if you're planning collections and you want to do something along the lines of what Professor Chandler's doing, and this provides you with another very good opportunity to get that material out there and further the scholarly conversation.